So thank you everyone for joining the third annual Dual Use Marine Technologies Workshop. I am Daniel Hayes, Managing Director here at Cyprus Subsea, also a part-timer at Cmmi under the Cyprus Marine Observations Network Center. You may have noticed this year is a little different than previous years. Oh, and before I get too far, I just wanted to let you know that we are recording this, so look your best. And we can discuss what to do with this, but by default, Zoom is recording all of this. For the archive, I guess we can have it, and then we can decide as a group if they're going to do anything with this in terms of publishing. But yeah, so Zoom is a different way of doing things. We've been doing last 2 years, obviously in person. We've had a little bit of, more presence from abroad in previous years. So the aim really at those two previous conferences was to bring experts in different sectors of marine technology and be able to interact with local stakeholders, engineers, scientists, professors, and bring us kind of up to speed on what are some of the latest technologies, both for civilian use, but also for security, safety uses. This year, because of the situation and because of a really, I would say, successful year for a lot of us who have been working hard to get funding, and now that's come to bear some fruit. And so I thought this would be a good opportunity to get together and see where we all stand and try to leverage each other's resources wherever possible to make a stronger local community. So this is very much a local conference, with the exception of our esteemed guest, Dr. Brewster. And that, I think, is very relevant because he's been in a similar situation in Ireland, and we're hoping that he can give us some advice or some stories that we can learn from. And so that's the aim really of this workshop, is to do some local networking. All the stakeholders who are online will be able to see what's going on in Cyprus, how they can take part and keep track of these projects. A lot of them are just getting started, actually.
Good morning, all. My name is Zacharias. I'm here representing Maritime Institute of Eastern Mediterranean. In this first session, European Strategy for Blue Growth, I have with me Mr. Zacharias Siokouros, CEO of the Cyprus Maritime Institute, and Dr. Paul Brewster, co-founder and director of QR Marine and partner with Cmmi at the MATTECX project. So I will give the floor to Mr. Zacharias Siokouros to say a few things about Cmmi.
Good morning, everyone. Thank you for the invitation to be here. Also to thank Angelos for the introduction, and actually we have to thank Maritime because of has been the cause actually of being today with you as Cmmi, because everything that I'm going to talk actually started with Maritime 10 years ago when it was established. And also to thank the next speaker, Paul, who is also a partner in Cmmi, but Ireland has also been an inspiration for us back in 2012 when we had the chance to read the then strategy of Ireland, harnessing our ocean's wealth, I think was the name, and we got a lot of ideas from there in order to go ahead ourselves and start building this ecosystem and bringing together stakeholders, which later help us also win this project. So I'm going to say a few things on Cmmi because it's actually the result of the effort of too many. So I think it's very it's a good example of how we can succeed things if we work together. So the Cmmi, as many of you know, it's a center of excellence. This is how it's also called under the specific program of EU. So it's a center of excellence focusing on marine and maritime research and innovation and technology development. It was established, as I said, with EU funding from the Horizon 2020 under the specific program called Teaming, which brings together local partners from abroad with existing know-how, the so-called advanced partners. So Paul, as part of the Marine Institute and together with his colleagues from Smart Bay Ireland and Southampton, were the advanced partners that help us submit a successful proposal back initially in 2016, and the results were given in 2019. So we started late 2019, and we are now in the first year of operation of Cmmi. So first of all, to say that the Cmmi was built on the agenda that is already known to many of you. So I'm not going to go all these policies and strategies from various bodies. So you all know that whatever relates to the oceans and the seas these days are very in the forefront of many bodies. So, and at the same time, we were trying to fill a gap that existed in Cyprus for all these years in this area, and try to connect the marine and maritime technologies with the emerging technologies, the so-called transformational technologies. So this is a list of the so-called transformational technologies that came from a study of another partner of Cmmi, the Southampton Marine and Maritime Institute, which they did a few years back, identifying technologies that will transform both shipping but also the ocean, the marine sectors at the same time. So we submitted a proposal with the aim of establishing Cmmi. As I said a few years back, the vision was to help to drive the blue growth in Cyprus through research and innovation. And we wanted an institution that would be driven by the actual needs of the industry and the society. So we are looking to find practical solutions to the problems that exist in these sectors. So what we did initially, we grouped the challenges that these sectors face into these 5 clusters. So it's maritime trade and transport, which is mainly shipping, ports, shipyards, and all this sector. Is the marine bioresources. Then it's the energy and subsea resources, another area of interest for Cyprus the last few years. Of course, it's climate and the environment and all the changes that we are facing also in the oceans as a result of climate change. And of course, how all this interacts with the society and the governance. So by grouping the challenges, then we try to find how we will address them. In Europe, the last few years, there is a lot of discussions on this mission-oriented research and innovation. So we apply this approach. So we set missions to our researchers, and then we go after this mission, trying to address them with projects and other activities in order to achieve tangible results. We are very much focused on applied research at the Institute because we want the society and the industry to feel the results of our efforts. So with the help of advanced partners like the Southampton Marine Maritime Institute, the Marine Institute of Ireland, the Smart Bay Ireland, which have been our partners from the start, but also with strategic partners coming from the local and international industry, but also academia. And I will show you later what we have done in this respect, together with our local partners, which is the municipality of Lernica, which is also leading this project, the Limassol Chamber of Commerce and Industry, and two private research organizations, Signal Generics and Geoimaging. We joined together and we are building these mission units, which are trying to address through our various colleagues the challenges and trying to find solutions in addressing these challenges. So in our proposal, we committed that we will address these specific areas of the marine and maritime sectors. And in order to achieve this, with the establishment of Cmmi, we have moved into building centers within the Cmmi. So we have centers addressing these areas. The centers are shown in this diagram, and we have centers addressing marine observation, marine robotics, marine technology, maritime digitalization, which is a major issue for the maritime sector in optimizing its operation. We have a Marine and Cultural Heritage Center. We have another center which is looking into the marine and coastal ecosystems. A center also related to the maritime human element, another important issue for the maritime industry. We have a center for underwater and seabed technologies. Also a center which is very relevant to what the Marine Institute has done in Ireland, which is related to marine and maritime policy and regional cooperation. And of course, we have the yellow shape on my chart, which is the Knowledge, Innovation, Entrepreneurship Center, which is a center trying to inspiring all our other centers in moving in this direction of creating innovative products and solutions, and inspiring the scientists to think also in a more entrepreneurship ways. Out of these centers, we are building the so-called Research and Innovation Mission Units, which are the shapes around the chart, which are specific units addressing specific challenges. And this is already in place, and this is how we now go ahead with the center. Now, how did we engage the stakeholders? As I said, the stakeholder engagement was from the first things we did, and I think was also a major factor for winning this project. We have set as a strategic goal for Cmmi to be the partner of choice for all relevant blue economy research and innovation.
Zacharias, can I stop you just for 1 second?
Yep.
There's some noise next to you, I think. I don't know if it's possible to maybe close the door, or it's unfortunate. It's hard to understand sometimes.
Okay. So, well, let me see if I can do something. So
if not, it's okay. We can manage.
Yeah. Okay.
But
so yeah, apologies. Yeah, the environment here is not very controlled. So we have engaged the local and international stakeholders, first of all, by having meetings with them during the preparation of our proposals. We are trying to identify gaps and their needs. Then, by establishing our board of directors, we extended invitation to stakeholders from all the sectors engaged in the marine and maritime industry. So you can see how the board of directors of Cmmi was built. So we have representatives from the public sector, from the fisheries department, the Ministry of Shipping. We have representatives from the academia, universities, local, but also from abroad. We have the MIT in our board. We have the Arab Academy in Alexandria, representing also our neighborhood. Because, as I said, regional cooperation it's highly on our agenda. We have representatives from the civil society and of course a lot of industry representatives, mainly from the local shipping industry, but also from other sectors of the so-called blue economy. At the same time, we have established an advisory council representing both the academic and the industrial sectors. So we have another body which is provided by the Articles of Association of Cmmi, where again we have additional stakeholders there, both, as I said, academic and industrial. The advisory council is now being established, and there are about 20 people there. So additional stakeholders represented in our Cmmi bodies. And beyond that, we are also building some other alliances through MOUs that we are signing with specific companies and organizations. So if you have seen, if you can see this screen, we have initially we had 26 letters of commitment when we were building the proposals, which help us win actually, and we are very pleased for having all this representation. Again, it was the result of all this stakeholder engagement. I don't think there was any other proposal with so many letters of commitment. So, and then since the establishment of Cmmi, we have also signed up to now 12 MOUs, mainly with maritime companies, but also local and international universities. And we keep signing MOUs. It seems that a lot of organizations want to be associated with Cmmi. So we are processing requests for MOUs almost every week. So we have another 3 now waiting to be signed. It's just sometimes the difficulties of not being able to move around that is delaying this, but we are trying to do it electronically, and so we hope that next week we'll be signing something with the Maritime Academy in Odessa. So, and so the concept that we are trying to promote is this. We name it Blue Web. So you can see on this web, the Cmmi is building with its centers all these relationships with various companies and bodies, universities, and so on, because we feel that by working together with all these partners, we can achieve much more. We believe very much into win-win situations, which is something that we have to promote in Cyprus, because it's something that we are not, unfortunately, very used to apply in our activities in Cyprus. And I hope Paul will tell us more on how they do it in Ireland. We believe that by working together, we can achieve situations where everybody will be benefited. So, well, some nice pictures from various events where we have been engaging with the local ecosystem, but also with the international. You may have seen, you may see at the left bottom corner, it's an online ceremony for signing an MOU with the Arab Academy in Alexandria. The aim, of course, of Cmmi was not just to do research and innovation, but also to have to transform the society. So it's among our missions to help in this respect. So we are trying to, at the same time, to help build the cluster locally. Maritime has in the past worked a lot on this, bottom up, trying to create this concept of a cluster. I'm not going to go into the definition because by now I think everybody is familiar with this. So, in order to achieve this this concept of a local cluster, we decided to move beyond what has been done up to now, and instead of having something very loose, we decided to go even further And in order to achieve this, we have initiated, together with the Cyprus Shipping Chamber, the establishment of the Cyprus Foundation of the Sea to be a formal cluster organization. It's been in place since 2018, and its administration is now coming to Cmmi on the request of its members. So we are signing, hopefully very soon, an agreement where we will be running the administration of the Foundation of the Sea. Foundation of the Sea brings together all the local stakeholders, and it's going to be a formal cluster organization. I think it's probably the first one in Cyprus from any other from all the sectors of the economy. I think we are the first to establish such a thing. We have a strong support from the government. The government even committed some money to help the initial running of the foundation. This is the structure, again, with a lot of engagement from the local ecosystem. Already some committees have been established and they are running. So the aim of the foundation is to support all the research activities related to the sea, to support education, which is something very important, especially for the shipping industry, but also to attract people in professions which are relevant to these sectors. So somebody will say this is really a public-private partnership because you have the government, the academia, and of course the industry. I'm not going to say why shipping is important, but I can only say that there was definitely a huge gap a few years back, and now suddenly we managed to fill this gap by establishing both the Cmmi as a research and innovation foundation, and at the same time a cluster organization like Cyprus. And so we can now proudly say that as a maritime hub, Cyprus now cover all the areas beyond ship management and ship owning, and where we have always been strong as a country. So with this, I finish. Thank you very much. If I just want to make to ask if there are any questions to be able to answer them later, Dan, if you allow me, because I have something that I need to urgently attend in a few minutes, but I will be back soon. So,
yeah,
and
sure.
hopefully from a place with less noise.
Yeah,
And I hope Paul will give you a nice picture of Ireland. Thank you.
Thank you. Yeah, we'll collect all the questions. Thank you very much.
Yeah, okay, thank you very much.
Thank you, Mr. Zacharias. We've heard about the new developments now in place last few years in Cyprus. Now we move on to Dr. Brewster to see some examples from Ireland on collaboration and competition for growing the blue economy.
Good morning, everybody. Can you see the presentation?
Yes.
Perfect. Well, first, I'd like to thank Dan and the organizing team for inviting us to participate. As you heard from Zacharias, we're an advanced partner in the development of the Cmmi, and I suppose initially we were delighted to hear that Zacharias and the team were inspired by a lot of the work going on in Ireland. And I suppose over this last few years, engaging to share some of the experiences and insights from the work we've been doing in Ireland. And it's great to see that. I think in some ways it's stimulating, some of the developments, lots of similarities and lots of differences, no doubt, between our two countries and our two regions. Same in the way we're trying to grow our blue economies. And I think there are lots of areas where we can learn. And I think it's two-way. There's lots of areas where maybe we can provide some insights and knowledge. And equally, we know there are lots of areas where Cyprus is very strong, and Zacharias, the maritime and shipping side of it. So we're delighted to be working on the project with the team. As I said to Dan, thanks for. I would have loved to have been in Cyprus with you all today. first and foremost to engage with all the different people that are there. I think we're all missing that social aspect of these projects. Secondly, because it's still dark and very cold in Ireland here, so I'm jealous watching the sunshine coming through your windows there. But hopefully next year, it was this time last year that I had the opportunity to meet the team when we launched the Cmmi project with our president Nukran, President Higgins, his visit to Cyprus. So I think we were scheduled to have another meeting back in February that got postponed, and are today. So I'm looking forward to next year already, as indeed I think many of you are, and hopefully getting a chance to visit Cyprus once again. So let me just try and get my So I think there are broadly three areas I was keen to cover today. I'll give you some background on Ireland, our maritime sector, and indeed, I suppose as I said, there are lots of similarities and lots of synergies that you'll hopefully draw inspiration from, and some differences too. And even in the differences, I think you can see, I mentioned the principles and the way we can go about growing our blue economies. I'll explain then again some details about our maritime strategy, Ocean's Wealth, and I suppose bringing us up to date, a lot of our more recent activities and development, and again hopefully to provide some pointers for where opportunities may lie for Cmmi and all the whole marine and maritime space in Cyprus. So I think as Zacharias was explaining, I work for the Irish Maritime Development Office, the IMDO, and we are part of the Marine Institute in Ireland. Our mandate comes from the Department of Transport, Tourism and Sport, and we advise the government and the minister on port, shipping and the maritime space. And the Marine Institute is part of the Department of Agriculture, Food and the Marine, and again more focused on the sort of seafood, marine science side of things. So again, I suppose between us we cover the two big areas in the blue economy. The structure of Cmmi is similar in many ways. That I think in many other areas you see these two parts of the marine and the maritime separated, and that can cause problems. So bringing those synergies together is very important. So as I said, we advise the Minister of Transport and Ports and Shipping and help with the development of policy in that area. We have a business development function, which on a national basis again is supporting our port, shipping companies, maritime businesses. Funding, accessing EU funding is the area I work a lot on, and then equally on international areas such as this, we outreach and get involved in networks across Europe and internationally, again to help strengthen our maritime economy. But equally, it's a two-way thing that I think by sharing and collaborating, everybody grows, and that's at the heart of our activities in those areas. So Maritime Ireland, we are, so similar to Cyprus, a relatively small island, but both of us geographically are very strategically placed on both ends of Europe. And I suppose our sector, in many ways, companies and turnover, it is probably the largest part of our ocean economy, and we've done a lot of work on that down through the years to quantify what the different sectors mean and contribute, and from that you measure your progress and know what's working and what isn't. The companies, again, very similar to the sort of the types of companies you'll be familiar with in Cyprus, the shipping companies, and again, some of the big operators. You know, we are, you know, rely heavily on our shipping and connectivity to Europe. So the likes of Stena, Irish Continental Group, you'll be familiar with in Cyprus, on our ferry companies, and that have been doing a remarkable work over the last number of months in the current crisis that we're facing. So the maritime companies, and then equally, you know, you have the sort of, I suppose, the background behind that, services companies with expertise in the maritime sector, and our research institutes, and the alignment of I suppose the research activities with the sort of economic ambitions is something that's very well, and it's great. I think it's an area that Cmmi is making great progress on just setting out. It can be very difficult in many ways to get all these things aligned, but it's very important work. And I think where you see the rapid progress, when you look back, you see it as the areas where you have sort of alignment on research agendas, on everyone's different agendas. We have, and this is an area where, you know, Cyprus's strengths are we are relatively small in terms of the Irish flag and our maritime administration, but our seafarer training college down in has a very high reputation and does work around the world. And then in relation to our transport corridors, as I said earlier, we are perched on one side of Europe and Cyprus on the other, and connectivity for both of us is vital for our economies. And with that, I think it becomes an imperative for us to make sure that our maritime sectors are among the most efficient, the most connected, and I suppose in modern times we're seeing the sort of climate change and the decarbonization agenda rising up, and you know, that has to be important for us as well. And then we look at just some of the assets we have. Our ports, our main ports based in sort of deep water estuaries around the island, and you know, again, some large shipping companies are involved and be taking advantage maybe of our ICT base and our support services base that are quite mature. We have seen a growth until this year, unfortunately, in cruise tourism to Ireland, and then one of the bigger areas that remains largely untapped is the offshore renewable energy. You know, our Atlantic coast is one of the largest resources for offshore wind and wave energy on the planet, and I suppose our remoteness makes it very difficult to connect all these large resources to where the population centers are in of Europe and so on, but they still are there, and there is work to see where they can be harnessed and connected on a commercial basis. And also on aquaculture, the same waters across the Atlantic themselves and have lots of benefits in the aquaculture area. Farmed organic salmon is an area in particular where Ireland has lots of potential, and are looking to create opportunities there. The other component of all this is our embassy. It was our Irish embassy that helped organize the event last year in Cyprus, and they do a fantastic job around the world, helping us to connect with the different regions and the different countries that share similar ambitions. And as I said, our work with you, Zacharias, and the team, they're there to facilitate and support all this engagement at all times. And we and I suppose I'm moving on to just some of the our development agency, the IDA, that work across all sectors, have been doing enormous work down through the years, and just looking at areas where we have, I suppose, advantages. Our young population, lots of university educated people, and also looking at areas where we've just developed, either by accident or design, but have just developed capabilities that we're able to compete globally. And in the aviation sector, for example, the leasing in that area, part of that is undertaken in Ireland because we just developed that expertise early on, and it stuck. And equally, you'd be familiar, again, probably linked into our geographical location. We're the first touch point for Americans in many ways to access Europe. So we have seen, Microsoft, Google, Intel, IBM, so lots of the big ICT companies have seen Ireland, primarily because, as I said, of the workforce, and the university talent pool that's there. And again, they've seen it probably as a strategic base to access the European market. That probably try to give some background to the maritime sector and maybe the wider Irish economy, areas where we have strengths and areas where we can develop. And that led on back after the last financial crisis, the government seeking areas. There was opportunities to grow and develop, and work the Marine Institute had been doing for many years to highlight the size of our marine assets. And we found initially through economic analysis that there were significant scope for growth and development of our economy. We largely, despite having some of the largest marine assets in Europe, significantly underperform other ocean economies, our neighbours in Portugal, Norway, obviously being one of the leaders. We're well behind, the real leaders in this area. I suppose the strategic thinking was just catching up with what is average would be a significant step forward. And I suppose, again, historically in the past, we probably didn't pay as much attention to our marine and maritime economy as we should have as an island. And I suppose definitely this last number of years with the COVID and Brexit, our maritime sector has become very, very indeed. So we've been doing this for a long number of years and making progress, and no doubt the current focus on the maritime space in Ireland will help us do more of this in the future. So we identified, and again, I think Zacharias, a lot of these sectors are very similar or slight variations on them, but lots of established sectors: shipping, maritime, and seafood. But then new and emerging sectors, and in Ireland, the offshore renewable energy and biotechnology, and maritime commerce, as I mentioned, looking at the leasing side of it. So as we begin to see, leasing become in the sort of shipping sector, then a lot of the expertise that Ireland has in aviation can play a role there. So we have, I suppose, throughout all these sectors, a number of development agencies. The Marine Institute on shipping, on marine, SEAI on energy, and then the general development agencies, IDA and Enterprise Ireland, who are looking at the sort of broader supply chains nationally and internationally. And areas that we realized early on was that the marine and maritime sector crosses all of these agencies, and I think in every part of the world, we see silos being created where, you know, they have their task and their job, and, you know, some of the cross-cutting opportunities can fall between areas, and therein I think we saw the analysis, some of the opportunities and the bigger opportunities in the maritime space had that problem, that it was, you know, there were agencies that had responsibility, but to do the whole area properly, it was going to need some interagency cooperation and collaboration. And at the start of all this, we undertook some detailed economic analysis of our sectors, and it's clicking on me there. You know, to establish their contribution, to examine programs that the different agencies had. It's not going to be here for me, but essentially to sort of set out a pathway to and grow our economy, and to measure it along the way. We can do lots and lots of very interesting work, but you know, that economic analysis to measure the progress has been very important in all of this. The other area that when all the agencies, was that we have to do something not out of naive ambition, but to look at areas where we have real competitive advantage. It might be our geography, as I mentioned, or our university graduates, or our expertise, areas where we've been doing research and building capacity in that area. So we had to sort of build on actual competitive advantages that we had. So with all of the agencies, there was a report back to government that recommended the establishment of a team. So a team that could help with the interactions and the engagements and areas where there were cooperation and collaborations needed, that, you know, this team could help with that. And I think we can all see the problem that this was trying to address, and it's one of the areas that in recent years it struggled to really get established. And again, you can see the problem at the heart of it is agent job to do a very specific focus, and in many ways nobody likes, you know, to be asked or by someone else that they should change. So it is no doubt a very difficult area to get right, and lots of different structures. This in Ireland, you know, to be truthful, hasn't worked as well as we'd hoped. There are some examples where, you know, the agencies work very closely, again, through this, but in many ways, and a good example is in the area of offshore renewable energy. So ourselves and SEAI, who are the energy authority, share the same offices in Dublin. So you can see it becomes very easy to have this sort of coffee shop engagement where, you know, you meet in the corridor, in the canteen, and it becomes very ways to share what's going on and areas you can work together on. So it still highlights, and has always highlighted to me, the importance of looking at these areas where we've got shared interests to see, can we do more than just working on our own? And it's definitely a work in progress, but the principle remains the same. And I think under it all, it is just this point that, you know, in any, I suppose, area that we want to work, and we are all focused on our blue economies, it is this joined up thinking approach, and all the various and economic analysis around this, be it clusters or helixes, they distill back to some very simple things that we all know works well when we see success. The one area that I suppose where we see all of this is that it's the sort of industry leadership, I think, is the important thing not to forget, that there will be areas where we've got very established, mature industries, and say in Ireland, I mentioned our ports and shipping sector, where, you know, I think we've really seen 12 months come to fruition in Ireland, where, you know, the government's role and development agency like the IMDO is to facilitate in many ways that industry can step forward. The other area is where industry maybe isn't as developed and mature, these emerging areas, then there is a more heavy involvement from government to help the industry get established and build capability. So that's the sort of background to, I suppose, where we've come from. Coming up to date and some of the that we're currently working on, I suppose, just to give examples of some of that at work, where it has we've seen it work well, as I said, with maybe the marine development team, where we've seen areas that haven't maybe taken off as we'd hoped, but have highlighted, you know, ways that it can be refined and improved to try and move things forward quicker and over the next year or two. So one of the areas that I mentioned we've been looking at is a shipping services center, and this is, again, is looking at, I suppose, building on our financial services center that's long established at this stage, and the work we've been doing in aviation, and indeed a lot of the banks based in Ireland are involved in aviation leasing, and are seeing the growth of that in the maritime. So those technical skills, you know, reside in Ireland, and again, we're looking at areas where we can partner with other regions and try and bring that expertise into the shipping area. We mentioned our ICT base. We have our True Science Foundation Ireland, our research agency, invested in a number of research centres. So bringing together the different research groups and universities into centres with scale that can, I suppose, engage with industry at a much more detailed level. One of these centres is Insight, which is our Centre for Data Analytics. And I suppose when you begin and find out more about these areas, and you speak to other, you know, I suppose, meetings in other parts of Europe, and you mentioned our center, Insight Center, has over 300 data scientists working, and people go, how many? So it is, they have built capacity and capability in this area. They work on telecoms and health and other mainstream sectors, and we've been working with them over to get them more involved in the maritime space. And indeed, we're seeing that, I suppose, a lot of that work now globally, across Europe and globally, on the sort of smart cities and smart ports type areas. And I suppose digital infrastructure, we're seeing more and more becoming a competitive advantage for any of our ports when they're looking to get established in existing sectors and new sectors such as offshore renewable energy. So we have, I suppose, with Insight, been involved with a number of European projects and networks, and again, it's great to see the progress that Zacharias and the team have been made in engaging in that area. And I'll talk a bit about it later on as well. I think in Ireland and in Cyprus we share probably a similar problem in that our size. It's very difficult to develop projects of scale that can attract attention. They can be very big for Ireland and Cyprus, but you know, at an international level, we can get forgotten about to a degree, and so that's definitely a challenge. The reverse of that that we've always tried to make a point of is that we're maybe small in terms of scale, but we're big in terms of ideal to trial. So to be the sort of destinations for trialing and prototyping before we roll out into larger areas. And you know, so our small scale can be turned into an advantage in many ways. And I say that lends itself to these sorts of areas, where one of the first smart cities projects in Europe was undertaken in one of our national stadiums in Croke Park. So which essentially behaves like a city, like in all these large football matches with the people coming and going, the retail outlets. So I mean, that was a fantastic project when you saw that presented. And say a lot of the technologies they were able to demonstrate there on a stadium, that can be replicated in a city like Dublin, that can be replicated in large cities around Europe. So again, that's something to bear in mind when we maybe think that our size holds us back. It can be an advantage for the trial and demonstration of these areas. So one of the big areas and big opportunities for Ireland over the next number of years is in our offshore renewable assets. So this is something we just, you know, some people have oil and gas, some people have beautiful sun climate, and Ireland has lots of wind. And so we have a very large resource, as I said, all around the island, but in particular along our west coast. We've been slow to get going on it. I think there were two, I suppose, reasons for that. The first one, our demand for electricity is relatively small. So, you know, what do we call this electricity that's connected? And interconnection into the European system is a part of that. But I think the other area that's driving growth in this area at the moment is the sort of power to fuel, power to X initiatives, where we're seeing green hydrogen, which will be produced from offshore wind and other renewables, and that, as we're seeing in the shipping, other areas of our transport, with hydrogen buses being trialed in many cities, that it could well be a opportunity to transform that wind resource into fuel that can be used all over the world. So there's lots of areas going on in that. Our ports, while they have a relatively small part in cost terms to all of this, there's no doubt our ports are central to these sorts of initiatives. Any offshore business, our ports have always been gateways, hubs for these areas, and offshore renewable energy will be no different. We're seeing that with the growth of the likes of Esbjerg in Denmark and some of the ports along the east coast of Britain, and our ports will have a very important role to play in facilitating the rollout of these projects, but also the growth of the supply chain and the enterprise piece around that to create the jobs in the local economies. So I think there's a template that we're working to on the renewable side that is applicable to many other sectors, you know, and to looking at where the competitive advantages are, the particular assets that you have that can be brought to bear to help make those sectors take off. So I was trying to then, so bringing all this together to look at the challenges, but equally some of the opportunities that we see that I think also reflect, I said, maybe in slightly different sectors that you know are more an environment geographical type area. But I say that the principles, I think, are the same and can develop our blue economy. I suppose making it greater than the sum of our parts. As I said, we will all do our best in our particular areas, be they in the research areas with our universities. Our companies will obviously be striving to improve what they do. the development agencies will look after ports and shipping, and energy agency will look after energy. And, you know, but I think delivering projects of scale, I think, is the challenge for both ourselves and in Cyprus. And we can't do it alone. I have no doubt about that. And, you know, that, so I suppose collaborating with our European partners is part of it. I think equally, and we, I suppose in Ireland, tend to look across the Atlantic to America and Canada, where, you know, lots of common interests. And I think equally, when you see the sort of Western Mediterranean area, there's lots of neighbours around Cyprus where, you know, you share common interests and can build capacity and projects of scale together as well. So that's definitely an area where I think we're all interested in doing that there. We're, I suppose, looking at where our competitive strengths lies. You know, some of this may be similar, no doubt. Some areas where Cyprus has got strengths that we don't. But as I said, the principles of the same. You know, we can't build this on naive ambition. That, you know, we have to try and look at areas where we've got capacity, capability, and some competitive advantage, because I think what we achieve in those areas will be, you know, significant, rather than trying to create something from scratch. And I mentioned collaborating with our neighbours. So an example of this, a new Atlantic action plan has been launched with a set of new priorities that the IMDO and the Marine Institute were in a number of workshops to look at this area, to see where the Atlantic action plan could be improved. And one of the areas is where the vital role that our ports have been playing. And I suppose as we have realized and always understood, that they work, you know, out of sight, out of mind in many ways, but they are the vital gateways for trade as island economies, and increasingly as hubs for our blue economy and the different growth sectors that we need to undertake. And bringing all this together, and we say this a lot when we say we need to collaborate, but it's experience in Ireland with a lot of the activities we're trying to do. When you look at the successes that we've had in recent years, it has been through those collaborative efforts. We on the digital side, you know, we have faced the challenge of Brexit and threats to our connectivity. We have reached out. We have been engaging a lot with our colleagues in France, our French ports, who probably share similar challenges. And we've now started a collaborative project with the ports of Cherbourg on the development of a fast trade lane system, which will not only help Ireland's connectivity to France, but looking at our any new changes to our connectivity to Britain. But equally, you know, some of the companies that we're working with would see how this is applicable across the European transport network. So that's our sort of a digital areas. And again, I mentioned on the offshore renewable side of it, there are I suppose all of our ports are interested in new business, and we're looking at ways where we can, I suppose, bring this together to make sure that we're not all fighting over breadcrumbs, and instead we're trying to maximize the opportunity for this new resource in Ireland. So, as I said, hopefully there has some insights and experiences from Ireland that will benefit the discussions today. I'm delighted to be able to participate and share some of our experiences from Ireland, and I suppose would have preferred to be there in person to hear a lot of the talks. I think you have a very exciting agenda ahead of you today, Dan and the team, and with lots of areas that we are interested in seeing where, you know, other countries are doing and other initiatives on to learn from those areas as well. So I wish you and wish everyone the best of best of luck for the next few days in the event. And I say I look forward to engaging with you over the next number of years on both our journeys.
Thank you, Paul. As you said in your opening remark, our nations have similarities, so we have to take advantage of the proven best practices that are being running over the last few years in Ireland. Hopefully, with the development of Cmmi, our goal will be easier to be achieved. I don't know if you see we have some questions from the audience. Especially if you're running, from Professor Nikitakos, if you're running an EU project for green hydrogen using offshore renewable energy in Ireland.
There are, I suppose, a number of projects that are under development, Angelos, and we have undertaken lots of studies and looking at how we can access our offshore renewable energy assets. And there's a project in EIRWIND undertaken by the Marine Research Centre last year. And I suppose the next stage of that a lot of us maybe understood that while we can site the offshore wind farms initially to transport electricity to our population centres, and that grid infrastructure and connectivity becomes a limiting factor. The growth and opportunities for green hydrogen, the production of green hydrogen has prompted, I suppose, interest in that area. So there are a number of developments that are focused on that. Some of them I know are progressing under the radar to a degree. There I suppose significant European funding being targeted at this at the moment. So I think anybody working in that area should keep a close eye on that. The new Green Deal, the Innovation Fund that's targeting that as well. So I know of a number of Irish projects that are preparing applications for their projects in that area. And I think I can see that being, we've, as I said, with offshore renewable energy, we've always been aware of the huge resource we've had, but I think in Ireland we've just always struggled with, well, what do we do? We don't need the electricity. Now that has changed in recent years, and I think that's behind this new target to try and develop of offshore renewable energy over the next 10 years. But we have significantly more resource than that available, and so the development, the hydrogen economy has been there for a while, and I think we've seen it in all the sectors, the transport sector, shipping sector in general. When we talk about alternative fuels, that it might be LNG, or LNG is a stepping stone to, and methanol and ammonia. And we've all these different fuels and technologies being progressed, and I think the industry at large is just sitting and waiting for some sort of convergence to happen. And hydrogen is the one that I'm increasingly seeing as well, that it has all the right characteristics, to really accelerate a transformation to a low carbon transport sector and so on. So I think there's lots of exciting developments in that area. I suppose if anybody is interested in that, I can put you in contact with the teams that are working on it in Ireland, and say happy to help with any introductions that we can make in that area.
Of course, that will be useful. As you said, there is a call now in the Green Deal that is about the use of marine renewable energy in general. So there will be room there for collaborations. We have a couple of questions regarding the maritime spatial planning and.
Just a second, I've just enabled Nikitas if he wants to follow up.
Yes, just okay. Good morning to everybody. Thank you very much for answering my question. Just to add something, you are looking for the offshore energy grid to be independent or connected to the electricity grid for the hydrogen, because this is very, very important. If it is independent, means that it is a very new deal related with offshore energy.
Yeah, it's the independence, Nikitas, is the key, because the cost of the grid infrastructure and the grid upgrades can be offset by, okay, bringing the export cable ashore and having sort of hydrogen plant onshore without connecting the wind farm itself to the national grid. So I think that they're the I suppose the approach that lots of the projects are taking, that the connection to the national grid can be a cost barrier to the offshore wind farm, whereas if they just connected to a localized plant, and they say a large hydrogen facility is I suppose the model that they're in here.
Thanks. Go ahead. I think that we should move on then. Thanks, Paul.
Thank you. Thank you very much.
Yes, Paul, we have a couple of questions regarding maritime spatial planning and its relation with aquaculture, and if we can transfer some best practices from Ireland here in Cyprus.
It's an area I'm not an expert in, but I know my colleagues in the Marine Institute spend a lot of time in this area, and from the outside, it's an area that I think we are still on a learning curve as well with. But as I said, there are lots of areas where I know colleagues in the Marine Institute are devoted to this, dedicated to these sorts of areas. So I think for me, that is one of the areas where I think we're both at an early stage in many ways. Our maybe policy development is further on, but I think all these areas in terms of implementation are still at a very early. And I mean 4 or 5 years ago, the aquaculture sector in Ireland was positioned for quite some significant growth. We had lots of competitive advantages. Farmed wild organic farmed salmon was being a very high value product. Norway and Scotland were having lots of success in that area, and some of the sites that Ireland had available were even better, but we haven't seemed to capitalize on that yet. And I think it's still in progress in Ireland in that area. So I think that definitely strikes me as an area where we might be able to learn together rather than one way.
I don't know if we cover the topics that Dr. Trentaphylidis raised. How about the linkage with spatial planning? Is the plan for Ireland being produced?
No, it's a work in progress, is my understanding, and it links to a lot of it will link to our offshore renewable energy. So I think like a lot of areas, there have been lots of developments in our marine areas. We're now having to try and accommodate into work on marine spatial plans. So I think what I've seen on it is a lot of it to move things in tandem and in parallel, as opposed to we can't wait or hold back the development of energy until a marine spatial plan gets finalized. A lot of these things have to work in tandem and in parallel. And I think the important lesson there, just from a policy perspective, that it's this, as Zacharias highlighted there, the role of the different actors there, and government's role in giving sort of clear, I suppose, solid policy environment for industry to develop that. And I think marine spatial planning sits along that area, that lots of these sectors require long-term planning long-term investments, and they can't afford any uncertainty, and I think definitely in Ireland there's an element of that. I think there just hasn't been that crystal clarity or certainty that we've seen in other member states that are maybe more advanced. Offshore renewable energy springs to mind, and as I said, there's definitely lessons there for all of us in the role for government to, how do you're always asked, the goal is to facilitate industry, and how can you do that? And it's long-term clarity in regulation and policy. It's not that industry wants no regulation; they just want clarity, and I think that applies to marine spatial planning as well. They'll want that to be clear and long-standing.
Yeah, that's definitely the case for offshore aquaculture as well. So we have a session on that later, and that's what George is getting at. I think he's heavily involved along with some of us in this meeting, and maybe we could just repeat one of those questions about the technology. So, I mean, if offshore energy is one of the sectors that's growing and is developing in Ireland, would you see any technology transfer, or maybe in a parallel line in aquaculture? Is there any technology that you've seen or that you know of is being developed for those kind of more offshore examples, in terms of aquaculture? Is there any relationship? Or, I mean, we're at the very early stage in Cyprus, and so we're kind of scanning the horizon to see what other people are doing. And so if you have any feedback.
I said some scoping work we did a few years ago. I think, I mean, Norway are in many ways sort of leaders in this field, and I think they have a lot of the when we talk about competitive advantages, what they have, the oil and gas sector, so they have lots of the very large engineering, industrial sort of businesses there. So when they talk about moving aquaculture offshore into the North Sea, they already have a lot of the engineering, manufacturing expertise for that. So I think definitely at some of the developments out of Norway are interesting. And we have the same challenge with offshore wind in it. So moving into offshore in the North Sea is a relatively more straightforward task than moving offshore into the Atlantic. So just the scale of the environment, the wave heights and so on. And well, again, when I touched on one of the earlier, when you see maybe some of the competitive advantages for Cyprus is, we know there's a drive to move aquaculture further. There's environmental benefits, there's scale benefits and health benefits, and maybe Cyprus is an ideal area to do that. Much better to trial and develop the systems in Cyprus than in the Atlantic, I'm sure, where you're just constantly facing the sort of more exposed environment, in terms of loads and so on. So, but Norway, Dan, is, I've always taken stock with what, from an engineering point of view, I said transferred from their oil and gas is what we've always looked at, and trying to maybe look at those opportunities transferred to Ireland. So Norway is definitely a model to look at.
Yeah. Thank you very much. George, are you satisfied? Could we take it? Looks like he says, yeah, many thanks.
Yeah.
Thank you, George. And thanks, Paul. Any specific questions? Go ahead, Angelos, you take the floor.
I was going to give the floor to you to proceed with session 2, but if we have some more questions, of course, since Paul is here.
It's really related, so I mean, it's just gonna flow through, I think. I was hoping to just get feedback from the people attending, and while we've got Paul on the line, on some issues that he brought up. And I can just, if somebody doesn't have anything right now, I'll say a couple of things I noted down. Please feel free to write in the chat as we talk here. definitely one of the key, I don't know, one of the keys to really getting this marine sectors to get off the ground was, seemed to me, to what you call the alignment of the agendas. So that seems quite a big task. I mean, if you have a research organization, some commercial entities, you have governmental entities, and of course, everyone has their agenda, as they should. Did you have any advice or any experience on how that happened? I mean, was it just pure and simple, getting together and discussing these agendas, or was there a forum to do that, or was it just, years of hard work? I mean, how would you approach that? I mean, we have done some of that here, of course, but what can you tell us about how you managed to get these agendas aligned?
I think there are a number of factors, I think, that combine in all of this, Dan. It was always striking to me that we were aware of Ireland's maritime and marine assets for many, many years. As those of us have been, involved in the sector for a long, long time, and yet it remained, and it wasn't until we had a huge financial crisis and recession that attention was turned to it, and the driver was action plan for jobs. And so I think there are a number, there are a number of fundamental drivers that almost strongly encourage is a polite way of saying it, but almost people are almost forced to say there's no other way. We have to sort of figure out how to do this. And that's, I think, a very extreme example of where alignment is facilitated by a crisis. But I think sadly, that is true the world over. And but if we can almost create that crisis, it is this analogy. If we can create that crisis, crisis thinking approach to say, well, there are, and as I said, driver that underpins it, are there jobs here and economic development that we could pursue that will benefit everybody? And I think when you create something then that has scale in that area, people very quickly align. People will forget about small budgets in different areas and realize, right, if we team up, we can do something of much larger scale, instead of looking being concerned about small local competitive issues. And I say local on even a regional scale, on a very narrow scale, whereas and that's a difficult thing. But I think when you look at areas that have had huge success, that's what they've managed to do. And one of the examples I can give is not an Irish example, but a Danish example. And we've been engaging with a number of the stakeholders there in recent years to try and understand so what Denmark has managed to achieve in wind power and offshore wind. And Ebjerg is a sort of a real leader in the field in that area. And you would find out from them, what were the secrets, and a lot of it was that sort of alignment that there are big opportunities for job creation, and there's a will, I think, for all of it. A lot of it does come from there's a political will and a political champion that identifies the opportunity and is prepared to sort of reach out and lead on that sort of an area. So when you have that sort of political sort of will and industries prepared to make investments that maybe on without that they become riskier, and I suppose, like anything, any sort of investments in all areas, there's a leap of faith, but you can't be silly about that. But the political will and leadership, and I suppose everyone aligning behind a sort of a single, and as I said, it was the action plan for jobs that the marine sector realized it could play a significant role in I suppose, re-establishing our economy after the crash. And it's more than played its part. We know last year, so every year we publish an annual socioeconomic report, and the maritime sector has performed tremendously well over the last 10 years. We I suppose a number of years ago again reached the various indexes that the IMDO monitor. We'd reached our previous in 2010, and our ports have done that. I suppose the whole economy's recovered and trade has recovered through our ports, and our ports have been doing this at a time when they've been undertaking lots of modernization and development activities. But to see that come, as I said, the core driver was that we're all going to try and get our economy back on its feet, and thankfully the Irish economy is back session levels, and before this year was beginning to perform remarkably well again. I think everybody has taken a backward step this year, but the underlying areas, there's strength there for us to take up next year. And the maritime, with that sort of a focus, you start looking at areas where I think it comes back to that element about naive, and that I think we all have areas where we'll have technology interests and expertise. You really have to search for that, that advantage. There's a big so what in there, and I said one of them can be, well, we can create jobs. We can, lots of the investment that the governments are putting into our young students, our university areas, our research areas. How can we transfer industry and enterprise and jobs for the local economy? So
yeah, that's great. Thank you so much. I mean, offshore aquaculture is one that we were going to address later, and a big one that we think there's growth. Maybe some people in the audience have other ones. I mean, we're going to talk about ports next after the break. But
Dan, a point you make about the aquaculture, I think it's something that has been discussed recently in Ireland, that well, it's very topical at the moment with all the negotiations that are going on. But our fishing sector, those wild catch fish, there have been constraints and quotas for a long number of years now, and the obvious solution has always been aquaculture. That we can A, it can help wild stocks, and B, it can be a more sustainable approach. And when we're going to see more and more, I think, over the next number of years, climate change and carbon emissions, especially with the European Green Deal coming into sharp focus for everybody, that it strikes me that aquaculture can be a much more sustainable way of I suppose getting the sort of seafood resources that we need. So I think there's lots of drivers there we have to pay attention to.
Yes, for sure. I hope you'll be able to stick around for that talk later, because I think you otherwise you catch the recording. But does anyone in the audience want to add to that in terms of what sectors they think might be able to grow in Cyprus as something that we already have maybe a competitive advantage or some expertise or some interest from investors or private sectors? I mean, tourism is a big one. I'm not familiar too much with that sector from the inside anyway. But maybe there are ways to look at ports as well. Michalis, maybe you get into that if you'd like. If it's not in your talk, would you know of any efforts or long-term vision in the political sector about, in Cyprus, about growing that part of the economy? Except for tourism, shipping is one of the big sectors in the economy here. Would you have any thoughts on that, or have you seen in your project, STEAM and the ones before that? Michali?
Hi.
Hi. Sorry to put you on the spot, but if you don't, we can take a quick break if you'd rather do that during your talk. No problem. We're ahead of schedule. So.
Yeah, I have nothing on top of my head to say that's gonna sound.
But I mean, we had meetings with Deputy Minister of Shipping, and we know that the government is behind the industry, right? I mean, I just don't know if there's a particular plan in place about how to grow the maritime sector in Cyprus, or it's, we're doing it, you and your collaborators in the projects around Europe.
If I may add, I think with the privatization of the ports, of the port of Limassol at least, and now the new developments in the port of Lernica with the marina, I think the government is showing the way to how to update all the port ecosystem and the port logistics, and how these private entities may assist in that effort on doing that.
What's the, sorry, I'm a little bit behind on the news. What's the strategy behind the Lernica Marina? Is that supposed to be more of a tourist destination, or what's the aim, the long-term aim of this development in Lernica?
As far as I know, the last, at least from my understanding, is that the port of Lernica will be used as a port for cruise ships and another for energy or something else, or commercial, let's say, shipping. So together with the developments of the marina will be on the tourist, let's say, tourism side. Find
ways to tweak the tourism dial, but nothing too drastic. It's not like someone, Nikitas mentioned, port specialized in offshore energy in the chat there. That's not what's on their mind at the moment, it seems like. So we have some work to do to sit down and think about how this could be, how Cyprus can make this plan. Oh, we've got a couple of hands.
I would like, actually, I'm from Greece, and I'm a professor in the University of the Aegean. But I haven't seen in all the Mediterranean some ports that be specialized for offshore energies, that similar with the ports that exist on Northern Europe, that there are so many. This is one question. And the second, that it is very, very crucial, is the cold ironing, which is another big issue for the maritime sector out of that. So all the ports, they should be prepared for cold ironing in order to accept the berthing of cruise ship mainly. Okay, this is.
Can you? So some of us won't know what cold ironing is, including me. So maybe you could give us a couple of minutes.
Cold ironing is the electrification of ships. I mean, according to the new IMO rules, if its ship is berthing to some port, they need to stop the engines for air emission pollution and just get electricity from the port.
All right, okay.
This creates a very big problem for the ports, because they have to, to accept and demand, which is very, very high for a cruise ships, let's say, for the ports. And this creates a problem for all the grid. So they need also the support from renewable energies. This is something that they are working in Northern Europe a lot about that.
Okay.
Absolutely. Yes, so we're involved. There's a Motorways of the Sea project called Ealing, which is a flagship project in that area. All aware of the need for cold ironing, especially port cities like Dublin, Cork, in particular in Ireland, where I suppose it becomes an air quality issue as well as a sort of a climate change issue. We did a study last year for our government on fuels and the demand for alternative fuels. One of the challenges for the likes of Ireland, and I'd say Cyprus as well, is that the levels of demand are too low to justify the investment in this. I mean, I suppose that's the dilemma, that, you know, the demand is too low to justify the investment in the new infrastructure, you know, to help provide these services. What we're seeing is the ports in the Baltic areas, in I suppose, you know, Rotterdam, Antwerp, Zeebrugge, the large northern European ports, where they have the sort of the level of demand there, have been investing in these technologies. But there are a number of technical and policy barriers to trying to get it rolled out in Europe. And as I said, that Motorways to the Sea project we're involved in, there's definitely a number of Mediterranean ports involved, obviously lots of the Atlantic North Sea ports as well. And we're a partner in it, looking at it from the policy perspective to try and understand, well, what can we do from an energy policy or a transport policy point of view to try and, you know, some of the barriers to getting these technologies deployed. And a lot of it might be what we found in Ireland was that our electricity prices is very high because of taxation. Marine fuel oil doesn't have the same taxation. And, you know, if you can remove those sorts of barriers, you know, all of a sudden the electrification or the cold airing becomes a viable proposition for our ports. So, say, again, it is an example of where we realized very early on we could not do anything on our own on this. And when we saw an opportunity to get involved with that larger pan-European Motorways of the Sea project, and I think very interestingly, lots of the big ports in Europe were in a similar vein, that they realized even they couldn't do it on their own. There had to be a more joined up approach to solving. And that, I said again, some of the issues I was trying to highlight during the presentation, that, you know, I think you very quickly identify areas where reaching out to get involved, you know, there's a lot. I think what you realize is the similar problem, it might look different in these, but it distills down to probably the, you know, similar problem in many ways, and you're far better teaming up instead of trying to go it alone.
Yeah. Okay, quick question before the break. If somebody has to go, Luis Haji Ioannou would like to have a question.
Dan, may I add something to Professor Nikita as I respond? In terms of cold ironing, of course, is under the same umbrella with LNG, let's say, facilities in ports. It's how we upgrade the capabilities of the ports and getting to the new era of supporting the vessels that they are berthing within. And in terms of ports linked to marine renewable energy, I think that the technologies need to be adjusted, because the environmental conditions in the Mediterranean Sea are not similar to the ones in the North Sea. So the technologies need to be adjusted in lower, let's say, environmental conditions.
Great, thanks. Go ahead, Luis.
Yeah, hi. Thanks, Dan. Hi, everyone. Luis Haji Ioannou, a marine ecologist working in Cyprus. Just a quick comment, not so much a question, is that with respect to tourism, because nobody mentioned, and I didn't see anyone from the attendees commenting either. Maybe there is somebody who knows more about this, but I know that there is a lot of interest from the Deputy Ministry of Tourism, as well as other sectors, to invest in diving tourism in Cyprus. And subsequently, there are some initiatives going on to enhance artificial reefs in Cyprus with respect to using them as diving routes for the tourism, diving tourism, ecotourism. And of course, this is connected to also upgrading of marinas and ports.
Okay. Yeah. Thanks for pointing that out. That's very exciting area. I mean, we've seen some efforts with artificial reefs. For those of you who probably already know that, most of you, but just to update Paul, there's been a couple of, a handful of shipwrecks, purposely placed to serve as artificial reefs on the southern coast. So serving dual purpose, I guess, in the sense of being a tourist activity, but also a place where ecosystems can flourish and grow. Ideally, Lewis would know much more about that, of course, but that's what he's talking about.
From a tourism perspective, one of the biggest developments in Ireland in recent years has been the development of the wild Atlantic, and our tourism agency, Falch Ireland, have been leading on that. So that's well worth having a look at.
Sorry, what was the name again? I missed it.
The Wild Atlantic Way.
Okay.
So you'll be able to find so lots of good information on it. It chimes with I think a lot of the issues I was trying to highlight. They identified, I suppose, an interest and a market that was interested in coming to Ireland and traveling a good West Coast, and people liked, I suppose, the remoteness of it, the engagement with the sea, and they very quickly realized there was little parts all along that coast, rural communities and so on, that all had some very, and very bespoke, small sort of attractions, and it was a case of joining them up. So that it epitomizes a lot of the areas that I think we can take lessons from in all sectors, shipping, renewable energy, and so on. But it has been remarkable of that tourism project, where they didn't have to recreate or build new in many ways. It was about joining up all the small local interests that were along this fantastic coastline that we have. And as it's just very interesting that when you mentioned the sort of the diving and the tourism, you could equally see and understand an interest from that area where an underwater sort of trail around Cyprus's sort of coastline. So in many ways it's about finding how to join things up rather than trying to create and make, trying to get new investment, sort of convincing people that you need to invest in lots of new things, whereas the effort can be about just joining up still good things that you have already.
Yeah, great point. Well, with that, I think we should take a break. Thank you so much, Paul, and to Zacharias, who had to take off, and to all the attendees, excellent questions, good discussion, and especially the panelists who contributed, the moderators.